Morning, everyone, and evening. It is just Ed and I today, which is wonderful. We are the OG middle-aged gaming crew. We miss Antoine, of course, but he's doing family stuff. His folks are over from France back to Canada, so he hasn't seen them in forever because of COVID. So, of course, he's going to spend some time with them this week.
We
So
miss
you guys
Phil
just
too.
get. Oh, of course, we miss Phil as well, right? Phil is sleepless in Kaohsiung, right? Going to bed late, waking up late. But I think at some point, once, who knows, when life settles down, things change, we'll get Phil and Antoine. We'll finally have a 4-person show again, which would be really nice. So today the topic is addiction, or not that kind of addiction, addiction in games. And in a good way and sometimes a bad way. I'm sure we'll go over both sides of the coin today. But before we do, as usual, we want to give you guys inspiration or ideas. If you're a new listener or an old listener, what are Adam and I playing? And today we surprisingly coincide on a game. But before that, I guess, Adam, what are you playing so far before we talk about that game?
Still playing a little bit of Apex and Final Fantasy 14, but I finished Omori, and so now I am into Monster Sanctuary. I finished Omori on the stream on Friday, and yeah, it was a lot of fun. I've had people ask, like, oh, are you going to play through the other endings? And I think I saved, right at the end, there's a decision that, or there's kind of a forking point where you can get, I think, 4 different endings, and I think I saved after that point. So I don't think I'm gonna. So I'd have to play through the entire game again to get to the other 3. And then there's the Hikikomori route, which maybe someday I'll do, but I think I'm good on Omori for now. But there was a lot to unpack there. It does hit you really hard, and yeah, it kind of sat with me for a few days after I finished it. You know, where it's just always on the mind, and you're thinking like, well, what about this and what about this? So yeah, it was a lot of fun, and if we got a few people chatting in the stream, so if anybody wants to do kind of a post-play deep dive Omori philosophical debate, then, you know, let us know in the chat or in the comments, and I would be more than happy to do a special episode with you guys. We could either do it, you know, live if you want. We can do it audio only and only release it on the podcast if you want, or we can record it and then edit it or whatever you want. But yeah, if anybody out there wants to do that, let us know. I'd be more than happy to do that with you guys.
So what was an issue that sat with you? Because I remember, and I talked about this on the show before, like a few times games have done this for me. Fallout was one of them. Fallout 4, which is why I love the game so much. So like, what's that with you, Omori?
What's that with me? It just, the characters, and then everybody was really well fleshed out, and this was one of the interesting things that I kind of found while I was playing. So a lot of people were posting spoilers all throughout the chat while I'm playing, which is fine. If you do that with anybody else, they'll get really mad. I'm the kind of person who is not terribly affected by spoilers. It drives my wife nuts, but like, for instance, we were watching Sweet Tooth on Netflix, and I immediately just picked up the comic and read the entire thing. And she's like, no, why are you looking forward into the story? You need to wait, you know? So we're like on episode 3, and I'm like finished with the comic already. So, or I'm the kind of person that like, oh, that sounds interesting, and immediately goes on like Wikipedia and finds out like what happens at the end. So that's me. I was trying to challenge myself into not doing that this time, but of course people showed up in the chat. But the characters are really well designed, and I think that for me, one of the biggest things was early on when people are entering the chat and they're saying, oh, you know, this about this character, that about that character, and And I was kind of like, nah, I disagree with some of those things. You know, I think it's more of this, and I think it's more of that. And looking at the fan base of Omori, it does typically seem to be younger, and I think that in a way that is actually kind of interesting because I think as an adult I viewed things very differently than the way a younger audience views these things. And the fact that it works on both levels where a younger person sees it from the perspective of a younger person and sees these characters through that lens and they're like, oh, this guy's being a jerk, or this person's uh overreacting, and as an adult I'm like, no, that's a very realistic way that this person's, they're not a jerk, this person is angry and they're trying to contain themselves but they keep lashing out, or this person's shutting themselves down, they're trying to they're in denial, and so seeing those subtle things where it looks like one thing on the surface, but with a more mature mindset, you can kind of see some of the struggles that these characters are internalizing. I think that's really what stuck with me. And then also just, try not to get into spoilers or anything, but the way that certain relationships with characters have changed over time, because you're playing most of the game in Headspace, where the main character, Sonny, is remembering his friends as they were as children, and he's having these childish adventures in his mind to escape the trauma of what's happened in his life. And then you see them in real life as they're older, and they've grown up, and some of them have changed dramatically and some of them haven't really changed much at all. But just seeing that from a perspective of like, oh yeah, in my childhood, and seeing how people have changed throughout life, and seeing people I was friends with in elementary school, and then seeing how we drifted apart in high school, or vice versa, where we weren't really friends in elementary school and then we grew closer in high school. But I think just all those levels really is what sat with me. And then of course it's a tragedy. That's the genre of it, basically, like a Greek tragedy. So and it's done really, really well. So it just sits with you where you're like, oh, why did it have to be that way? But in a way it's better that it's that way, because it really, instead of like, okay, everything's fine, it really internalizes it and makes you think and makes you address some of those issues. So yeah, that's why it stuck
So
with me.
it ends badly.
There's good endings, there's bad endings.
Okay.
It's not so much that the ending itself is necessarily bad, although I will say personally for me, the good ending I think is actually going to cause more trouble. It's one of those things where, again, as a on a surface level, if you were a younger person, you're like, okay, the truth is coming out. Um, so now everything is going to be okay. Everybody's kind of resolved their issues. But from my perspective as an older person, it's like, this is one of those times where, was the truth really the best? Because it's going to be opening up old wounds, and it's going to be causing pain that was, people had just worked through their pain, and now you're going to open up a whole new wound. And so, it's one of those things where, like, on a surface perspective, you're like, okay, everybody's happy now. But then at the very end, it's like, hey guys, I have to tell you this. And it's going to reveal what we, the player, had revealed and had discovered in the game. And, and it's the idea that, like, okay, now everybody's on the same page. But it ends right there. So for me, I'm like, uh-oh. This is going to really hit certain character. Like, for the main character, it's cathartic, but it could be very damaging to other characters. So it's the good ending, but is it good? So
That's very interesting.
mm.
Uh, and like, because I was debating about this, because I mean, whenever we talk about stuff, I always add it to my Switch wish list. There's a site now that I complained about this on the podcast. Like, the Switch has a very poor wish list, and very poor. Like, you don't know what games you have because there's no way to see it on the Nintendo Switch, or not in an easy way. And
Where's the
even if
point
you
of a
go
list you can't see?
That's what I'm talking about, because like, you have to go into your profile and from there you can see like the last games you played, but you can't see every single game you own. So I have to keep a paper list, not paper, like a digital list of all the games I own, so I remember what I actually own on the Switch, because that's how bad it is. And it's but anyway, the point is that there's a site called Deku Deku deals, and
Okay.
if you're a Switch owner, and you can wishlist games there, and you can also put all your games in your collection. And so whenever the games drop so below a price, it'll say this game is previous low, or this game is the lowest it's ever been, and you can go there and buy it, which is pretty cool. I like that. But I wanted to add Omori to that list, which is why I was mentioning that, because um, it sounds interesting. I just don't like to play games that have bad endings, technically speaking.
Yeah, no, I mean it depends on your definition of what is good, what is bad. It's yeah, it's not necessarily a quote unquote bad ending. It's the good ending, but
Oh no, not
um,
like, and even I'm thinking about this as I'm saying it. I'm like, yeah, man, I played Wasteland 3 and I did the bad ending in Wasteland 3, so entirely off my own doing. So,
yeah,
all right,
yeah,
yeah,
I'm a sucker for that stuff. So yeah. If have you ever seen like Lust Caution?
no,
Oh, okay, it's similar in the sense that in that one, the guy finds out the girl he loves is a spy, and it's one of those things where like, does he let her go? But if he does that, it could be very damaging to his country, his government, and all that thing. But he loves her, and ultimately he ends up doing, he ends up executing her along with the other spies, or having her executed. But it's similar to that, where it's I'm like, screw it, you're never gonna watch this movie, so spoiler, I don't care. But it's similar to that, where it's like, he did the right thing from his perspective, but it's still damaging, that sort of thing.
nice. I played and finished Far Alone Sales, a very interesting puzzle game on the Switch, and it's on the PlayStation as well. It's like a 4 hour game or 5 hour game. It's very like a you operate this like large steam machine, and you have to go from one end of the game to the other. That's pretty much it, and it's very much in the vein of that very famous space game FTL, where you control different parts of it. You have to pick fuel, and it was interesting. But like after an hour or so, I'm like, oh my god, I can't wait for this game to end. Uh, and it's not in a bad way. It's just like, okay, interesting. If I didn't know this game was a short game, I probably would have stopped playing it.
Mm.
But that was done. I played Ox Must Die with Hans. We're not playing the Division anymore. Ox Must Die 3. Very cool. I mean, still very fun, a very cool co-op game. It's one of the games I wish had more than 2 people for co-op.
I heard they got an update for 3 or something.
3 is just finally off the Google Stadia embargo, which is why people can start playing it as of the end of last year.
Mm.
Yes. So, and it's very much the same, but just with sort of like minor tweaks. It looks a little better. That's about it. But just a really fun co-op game, couch co-op as well. If you have a console, online co-op, if you have playing with somebody in another country or even in your country. And then the game Ed and I are going to talk about today is Monster Sanctuary, which after playing Wasteland 3, whenever I play like sort of turn-based games, I really have this like, man, I really enjoyed the turn-based stuff. I want to play another one. So I was like, Monster Sanctuary, and then I got my projector as well, and I wanted to play. I miss playing stuff in like a huge screen, so it's run. That's nice, and it's very interesting so far. And there are some elements I don't like. Like I know, like well, at least in Monster Sanctuary, it's a bit better. But like when you go past, you haven't been to a particular area for a while, and then the monsters respawn, and you have to try and dodge them. If you don't, you have to fight the same battle over again. Um, but it's so cool so far, and I love the part where like if you like for me, well, I just hate talking about stuff, but it gives you the option to like, okay, what's next? You talk to your little familiar, and your familiar says, okay, go here. I'm like, oh, thank you. And there's no extra dialogue or story about it. Just do it. I'm like, okay, cool, I can do that. And so
That's pretty
I'm
basic.
yeah. It's really, it reminds me or makes me wish Pokemon Go, Pokemon Let's Go was like that on the Switch, because Pokemon Go is like very too open for me. It's just like Zelda. Like I know why people like Zelda, but I felt like Zelda was such a waste of